So what Reinventing Stamford is a civic conversation through town meetings and workshops, over 150 business, political, community, and education leaders are creating a foundation for long-term economic growth, for energy efficiency, environmental quality, and reduced social and economic disparity. And the aim is to create a resilient, thriving city that's a magnet for talent, a center of innovation, and a model of green living. So that's the sort of basic proposition. It's worked as a conversation for these first 8 months, and we're right now at the point of transitioning from information gathering and conversation to strategy and action. And we've taken 8 months just pretty much to talk about conditions and capabilities. So the thing that you've done in 2 days, we took 8 months to do. And we did it without any self-consciousness about the language of the process. So you can do this, you can do the process without using the language of the process. And that's how we did it in Stamford. Underlying all of this is a notion of how change happens, and at least fundamental change. It's not the consequence of the implementation of a master plan. Very little change happens that way. It actually happens through the convergence of parallel, self-organized innovations, and the way that the trick of accelerating that process is to foment a shared understanding of conditions and capabilities. That's how otherwise autonomous efforts align, and it's through that alignment that you create the complex system that addresses the problem. That's the basic idea. It's not central planning, it's not top-down, it's very much bottom-up. And this is the formulation you've heard, and these arrows are meant to be aligning, not sequential. But it's important, at least in the American context, to use this slide, even if it's at the danger of thinking there's a rigid sequence and linearity, because as Americans, we tend to be ready, fire, aim. And there's a desire to jump to projects right away. Forget about the conditions, forget about the capabilities, let's just get something done. And the consequence of that mindset is that we end up solving the wrong problem most of the time, and in the process creating more difficult problems for ourselves. So we really bought some space with folks to say, we're going to take 8 months through 6 events to really talk about what the conditions are and the capabilities we need to build to exploit them before we start launching catalytic projects to build the capabilities. And while there's been some chomping at the bit, asking for that space, positioning the initiative as sort of a perishable good, enabled us to buy some patience, which is at least unusual for Americans. So one of the reasons why this process has to be iterative, why the conditions analysis isn't a one-shot deal or even episodic but ongoing, is that the fundamental condition is increasing uncertainty and accelerating change. The rest of the world would call this, well, the most significant condition actually are not any of the conditions we've talked about for the last couple of days, because those are the things that we know we don't know about. The things that will bite us are the things we don't know about. Now, the rest of the world calls those black swans. You would probably call them white swans. And the only stance in the face of uncertainty is constant surveillance. There is no other way to address it. These are the other conditions that I think about, trying to distill things down to a manageable number. This is probably still too big a number, but the discussion yesterday focused on the first four, a lot about climate change and closely related resource scarcity. We talked a little bit about financial turmoil, which is in turn deeply connected to global connectivity, and the financial meltdown was really the result of our global financial networks getting ahead of our ability to regulate them. And they're staying ahead, by the way. There's three others that I think about, which is immigration, what I call sclerotic government. We have government structures that were developed in the industrial era when times were simpler and slower, and they're just fundamentally not a good fit for these times. We experienced a tipping point in the US with Katrina, where there was a catastrophic failure at all levels of government to anticipate, to respond to, and to rebuild after that catastrophe. So if folks didn't think there was something broken before then, they certainly do now. And it also brought home the fact that government is actually important. But I'm not going to talk about that. The thing I want to focus on is the need for whole places. And these are the capabilities that we think we need to address the conditions that I mentioned. And again, I'm just going to focus on one of them. I just put this slide up there to show you that we're not, a one-note song in terms of placemaking, that there's all these other pieces. But I think given time and given the potential of the colleges and the halls to be players in placemaking, I just want to focus on that. And this is the only real eye chart and the only slide that I'm going to read word by word, because it's important to define what a whole place is. And I've been working at doing that for 4 or 5 years, and it changes every year as I learn more about the conditions and I do more to try to create whole places. But they're healthy. They're dense, mixed use, and mixed income. They're transit connected, walkable, and bikeable. They're distinctive in their built form and natural environment and in the public spaces in between. They're climate positive in energy and water use. That's a very easy thing to say and a very difficult thing to do. It's beyond climate neutral. It's actually saying we're going to produce more clean power than we use. Our water is going to go out cleaner than it comes in. The human environment is going to actually enhance the natural habitat. No place is doing that. We want to be the test bed for figuring that out. Whole places are learning communities and centers of ideas and exchange. You start to get how the colleges play a central role in this. They're rich in social networks. You're superb producer of social capital. They're enabling of innovation, entrepreneurship, and civic engagement. Those are all 3 different names of leadership. The skills involved in leadership, in innovation, in entrepreneurship, and civic engagement are all the same pattern recognition skills of expert thinking and complex communication. You develop one, you develop the other. You develop a civic leader, you're developing an innovator. You're developing an entrepreneur, you're developing an innovator and a civic leader. They're anticipatory of emerging conditions, always, constantly, and they're resilient in the face of climate change, sea level rise, and freak weather. So we're going to be good environmental citizens, and we're going to reduce our footprint, but we're also going to realize that that's only going to go so far, and so we have to also adapt to whatever climate change happens, and we can't just wait for it to happen. We have to think about that ahead of time.